Hmm. Hello, we are live. So hello, everybody. For those that don't know me, I've realised I don't introduce myself very often on these things. So I am Paul Wolstenholme, and I work in mental health, and I am the facilitator and founder of Pathlight Thrive Hive, which is this lovely Facebook group, which you may be watching in now, which offers support and inspiration and connection around mental health, holistic well-being, personal development, navigating life's challenges, the pandemic, and other things as well. And I also do mental health first aid, workplace well-being, personal coaching, that type of stuff. So you may be watching on YouTube, in which case, hello you as well. So this evening we have Jason Bromley here as our special live guest in the studio. Jason is going to be sharing his expertise and knowledge around holistic health, well-being, self-care. Jason does work for the local branch of Mind, local to me. So he's not here as a representative of Mind today. He's here as Jason Bromley to talk about how he has become a kind of self-care and well-being guru and the journey he has been on. So as usual, if you have any questions as we go through tonight's chat, you can just pop them in the comments. And if you wish, you can go to that little link that's scrolling across the screen now. There it goes, streamyard.com/Facebook. And that will give StreamYard, this software that I use, permission to use your name and your little profile picture from Facebook. So I will know who it is who's asking the questions. Otherwise, it will just say, Facebook user is asking this question. If you don't want to do that, no problem, it's fine. And two other things. If you would like to share the group amongst your wider network or any particular individuals who you think would benefit from being here, then please do so. You don't need to ask my permission or anything, just invite them in or send them a link. And finally, if you are getting some benefit from being here, then you can support the Hive in two ways. You can either buy me a coffee anytime, drop me £3 or any denomination thereof, any multiple thereof, or you can become a member and subscribe for £7 a month and get various benefits for doing so. So for both of those things, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/thrivehive, and many thanks to all those who have done so already. Your support is much appreciated. So without further ado, Jason is a very busy man. He's up to all sorts of stuff. So we need to make the most of his time, and we'll bring him in now. So welcome to Pathlight Thrive Hive, Jason, and thank you for being here.
Good evening, Paul, and anybody else who's joining us this evening. And thanks for the intro. Yeah, I am a busy chap, indeed, but it's good to be here. We did try and get it nailed down a while back, and unfortunately I had to reschedule, but I'm glad to be here and chat a little bit about self-care and my sort of mental well-being journey over the years, and hopefully we can touch on some tips and tricks and ideas that we can share between us all.
Sounds good. Yeah, so much appreciated. So would you like to just do a little introduction to yourself, Jason, who you are, what you do, and a standard question I ask everyone: what do you love? What are your passions?
Oh, right. Okay. So I should preface with, I should say that, Paul, you need to take full control this evening, because once I start talking, I do have a tendency to waffle. So do feel free to rein me in. I will not take offense. Yeah. So basically, I'm Jason. I currently work for a local branch of Mind. I should reference that there are over 100 branches of Mind across England and Wales. They're all kind of independently sort of run under the National Mind umbrella, and as such, all of those branches are responsible for their own funding and their own fundraising. So that's what I do currently, and I've been doing that, looking after the marketing, fundraising and communications for about 3 years. But prior to that, and really where a lot of my sort of health and well-being journey started, was working in the NHS. So I worked in the NHS for locally in the Oldham area for about 15 years, and we can kind of touch on that no doubt a little bit more throughout the conversation, Paul. But what do I love? What keeps me ticking? I think it's a particularly pertinent question in the year 2020. So, which is probably something else we may touch on in the conversation. What keeps me ticking is music. As you can probably tell behind me, I write songs. I've done that for years. I could class myself as being fortunate, lucky, and incredibly privileged to have had my formative years studying at Cheetham School of Music in Manchester. And that gave me a really solid grounding and a passion. My passion grew for music from there, really. Had the pleasure of singing as a chorister in Manchester Cathedral Choir. All from literally came from me seeing an advert in the local newspaper where a local chorister, a local choir boy, I think if memory serves, he was called Jonathan. Strangely enough, that name still sticks in my head. And they were basically advertising, saying, do people want to audition to try and become a chorister at Manchester Cathedral? And this was, would have been around 8 years old at the time. And mum and dad fully got behind me, and I got a funded scholarship for my opportunity to study at Cheetham's, and also the Cathedral Choir paid half of my scholarship because I was fortunate enough to audition and was successful to get into the Manchester Cathedral Choir. So that is my grounding in music, and that has kept me ticking over and has been a passion and a love of mine for many, many years. But if I'm honest, the performing arts in general, as a whole, all aspects of the performing arts and the transferable skills that the performing arts allows young people and adults to achieve. And also, I've got to obviously reference the outdoors, the great outdoors, the outdoor pursuits industry, and something over the years I've developed as a kind of sidearm career around the outdoor pursuits has been predominantly mountain biking and rock climbing. So those are two sort of quite big passions of mine as well. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, lovely. So yeah, I've seen some of your musical output, which is lovely, and I've seen some of your photos of the local area as well, which is just up the road from me when you're on your hikes and such like. So it's great stuff. The spiritual connection that we can get through nature and just being outdoors is wonderful.
I think more and more people are reconnecting with that whole concept, and being in the present and allowing yourself that time to stand, sit, walk, whatever you are choosing to do, and whatever ticks your box for you. Because I think that's a very, very important thing as well. Although we have so much in common as human beings, when it comes to our well-being, there's lots of different things that work for lots of different people. But one consistent thing is just being in outdoor space, preferably green space, water, those things. So anytime I get the opportunity to get out, you know what? I should practice what I preach more. I thought about this before I signed on this evening. This has been an absolutely terrible year for my mental well-being, and it's really tested my kind of toolkit and my resilience. And one of the things that has helped is getting into the great outdoors. But I equally acknowledge that I should have done more. I should have made more of an effort to use that part of the toolkit in managing my mental well-being. And also, I make a pledge to myself that even though the weather is changing at the moment, and it's becoming very wintry now, I have to remember my Cycle Club Oldham motto from over the years, which is there is no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing. And so yeah, I need to there's a lot of learning and growth coming from this year, and that's coming as a 41-year-old guy who's been around health and well-being for close to 20 plus years. 15 of those working in the NHS. So I suppose, without kind of wanting to drill it home too much, I think one of the key things that I've learned over the years is to not kind of be too hard on yourself when you acknowledge that you're still learning, and that continues for the rest of your life. It's like when you learn something new, not to kind of beat yourself up about it in terms of, why didn't I know that already? Or, I can't believe that I'm only just acknowledging this at, however many years I've lived on this planet. It's just absorb it, acknowledge it, and take it for what it is. It's a learning experience, isn't it?
So having that self-compassion, and I've beaten myself up quite a lot in the past, and not just for wishing that I had known what I've come to learn sooner, but also because I am quite a slow learner and I have to learn the same lesson over and over again before I finally embed it. So yeah, bringing a bit of self-compassion, a bit of gentleness to say, do you know what, I'm doing my best.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think that's probably more pertinent now than it's ever been, to be honest, because we've got, really kind of polarized society at the moment. Lots of heightened anxiety. And I think the reality is that without it kind of the whole conversation becoming too doom and gloom, this is the tip of the iceberg, really. And I think for anybody who has any kind of connection to mental health and mental well-being, not just in the UK but around the world, I think those people who are aware and tuned into that are already thinking in terms of what are things going to be like 6 months from now? What are things going to be like, 6 to 12 months from now? Not just in terms of the dreaded virus that I've coined Schmarona, but also just people's mental well-being in terms of this period of uncertainty, the reserves of resilience that people have stowed deep within, and the emotional toolkits that people have got. Over the years, when I've kind of been delivering self-care courses and stuff back in the day in the NHS, I used to always refer to your mental health toolkit as like a Batman utility belt. So, Batman, I always used to say, Batman, he's not I've used this particularly when I was working with young people. So we had like self-care courses that we delivered in the NHS for adults, but we also had self-care for young people. So when I was delivering it to young people, in terms of trying to appeal a little bit more to the younger generation, I used to reference that Batman wasn't a mutant. He wasn't. He didn't have superpowers. He had an awful lot of money. And one of the things that he created for himself, obviously, was the Batman utility belt, and he had all his fabulous tools and gadgets on there. And I'd sort of say, we need that, all of us as human beings. We need this Batman belt that's got tools on it that we can pull out anytime, any day, that will ultimately help us manage our mental health, our mental well-being, as we track our course throughout this world. So in fact, prior to us logging on tonight, because obviously I knew that this chat was coming up, I tried to find my original self-care manual from I think 2007. I have got it somewhere, but I cannot find it anywhere. I'm devastated. But what I did manage to find was my original certificate, which was quite random to come across. So I don't know how clear it will be for anybody to be able to see it. But this is my certificate for completing the self-care skills training course of 9 hours duration on the 8th of the 8th, 2006. Signed by a good friend of mine now, Yvonne McGlinchey, Oldham Primary Care Trust. So this was under Oldham Primary Care Trust. So that is my original self-care certificate there.
Complete with gold seal.
Oh, yes. That was back in the NHS days when no expense was spared. There was still money money available for fantastic community projects. Back in the day, I was locally doing things like healthy cook and taste sessions with asylum seekers in Oldham, doing proper real community outreach where you go and knock on doors and you talk to people and you make sure that these people aren't socially isolated. That's not to detract from the fact that there is still some outstanding and amazing work going on out there right now at a time when it is needed more than ever before. But that was, I suppose, my heyday. That was when I kind of got into health, and it was doing the self-care course, and then off the back of that, becoming a self-care trainer, and then all of that being integrated into an NHS pilot locally. So we ultimately, as a local team, developed volunteers off the back of delivery of this 9-hour self-care training course. And this was just all the building blocks and the foundation work for probably a couple of thousand people in Oldham and surrounding areas accessing this training, and then a percentage of those people then becoming volunteers to pay it forward, to cascade that training onto other people within their communities. It was a fantastic model. It worked really successfully, and really the only thing that kind of brought it to an end was the decommissioning of the health and wellbeing services in Oldham, and just strategically things just changing as things do over time. I think it was a 10-year wellbeing program in Oldham, and it was linked to sort of neighbourhood regeneration and all that kind of stuff. But that was where my sort of key principles for health and well-being sort of emerged, and I started to realize that there were these key things that needed to be looked after all the time. It wasn't just the physical, it was the physical and the mental, which sounds really obvious saying, but many people they don't balance the two equally, do they?
No, and certainly back in 2006, that probably was not on the agenda for a lot of people. I think that the mental health, the link between mental health, physical health, having some meaning in your life, having some creativity in your life, is only now in the mainstream, I would say. Back in 2006, that was probably a bit of a trailblazer. So just out of curiosity, Jason, when you went into that position in the NHS and you did that training course, and then you stayed within wellbeing for quite some time there, was there something that sparked your interest? Was there something that got you into it, whether it was a personal issue, or did you just fall into it? How did it happen?
I think the timing, I've looked for the parallels, and I've looked at where potential dots could be joined up in terms of my journey, particularly in the early days. And I do know that it was, I hadn't been working. In fact, this was pre-NHS. This was before I started working in the NHS. I had a really serious mountain biking accident. Now, I know this is slightly cliche, and I should really kind of make it very clear. In having this terrible mountain biking accident, I had a really severe brain injury and had to be rushed to Hope Hospital, had surgery. It was touch and go for a while. And there was quite a significant recovery period after that. And it was at that, I think that was an obvious turning point. So it's kind of obvious for me to reference it. But it wasn't kind of one of those, I don't think of it as being a tipping point. It's only now with hindsight that I look back and think, actually, the way that the cards fell in that period of time, the accident allowed me to not kind of look within myself in that kind of spiritual way, but it gave me the time and the headspace to evaluate a lot of things in my life. And one of them was my sort of insecurity within kind of career and career path and development as a human being, and forging my path. I'd done a bit of guitar teaching, I'd done a bit of work as a youth worker. I'd ended up on the original New Deal scheme. I don't know if you remember it or not, but the first time round, it got a lot of criticism, but it actually for some worked really well, and for a period of time it worked quite well for me, because it meant that I could get some money, and I was fortunate enough to get a placement doing something that I quite enjoyed, which was working with around cats and horses. So for me, that was just, I know there were horror stories for other people that maybe didn't do so well with the scheme, the New Deal scheme. But yeah, I think it just gave me that breathing space and that headspace to start thinking about my health more seriously, looking at career and opportunities at a ground level within local NHS. And I think the timing was really good, because it was a time when the NHS had started to realise that they couldn't just stick posters in GP surgeries and expect to positively impact on community knowledge, community engagement, encouraging the communities to take better care of themselves. New health initiatives were being forged. Money was being ploughed into it. Hence, Oldham being chosen as one of 3 pilot sites across the UK for the self-care programme and the rolling out of that programme, and quite a lot of money invested in all of that. So I think the timing was key. And coming from a performing arts background, some of those skills were transferable into a community development, community engagement role within the NHS at a local level. And that's where it all started ultimately.
Yeah, and that engagement is so important, isn't it, to get people really invested in their own well-being. So from the NHS, did you then go to Mind? Was that the next step?
There was a few different paths between the NHS and Mind. There's been obviously lots of sidelines. So there's the unfortunate aspect to my role in the NHS was working under Pennine Care. The service was decommissioned and I was made redundant. It was a really sad time. I think it was a sad time not just for the staff and volunteers involved with that programme of work. There was a lot of big stuff going on at a national level that was lost as well when that programme was decommissioned. So, for example, one of the programmes of work that I was looking after in my last year at the NHS was a programme called Playing Safely, which was originally created by a chap called Colin Avery. A fabulous guy, and it was a massive sexual health programme that was linked to the Premier League and working with young up-and-coming footballers around sexual health and well-being. It wasn't a massive contract, but it was about £60,000 contract, and it was quite high profile because of that natural link with football and the Premier League, and that was just gone. And then obviously all of the self-care stuff at a local level was gone. So there was a period of adjustment and reflection. I think that was probably about 6 months, if I'm honest with you, where I just took time out, and it was quality time, and it was time that was needed. And I still look back on that period very fondly. It was slight rebuilding, I suppose. And again, it's drawing that comparison between the accident and having that time and allowing yourself to have that time. And same again when I'd been made redundant from the NHS, giving myself that time to evaluate and figure things out. So yeah, guitar teaching, some acting work. I'll just drop a couple of little nuggets in here. So these kinds of time frames that we're heading into now, launching Pink Triangle Theatre with my husband and my good friend Stuart. That was an LGBTQ theatre company. We toured all over England for about 6 years, performed to over 10,000 people, really just raising awareness around predominantly equality for all, the equality message, and tackling bigotry, homophobia, intolerance generally in society, and had some wonderful work over 6 years doing that. So people that are kind of tuning in now, and anybody sort of listening or watching, you can yourself start to join up these dots, where, you know, performing arts background, accident, NHS, well-being, music, outdoors around the same kind of time, around sort of 2010, I think it was. Cycle Club Oldham, ran that for years. Wrapped that up last year because it was one of those things that, like all of us, having done something for such a long time, 12 years, I think it was total, 10, 12 years, it was just one of those things that was like, this needs to be put on a shelf now. I need to make more time for other endeavors and other projects, and I need to not feel bad about that. So I had to cleverly structure a way to slowly, over the course of about 6 months, withdraw, slow things down, reduce the fleet, and have some very great conversations with Positive Cycles in Oldham, and the chap that looks after that, Martin, and some of the other guys, and just sort of say, look, this is where I'm going now. I want to kind of informally hand the reins over to you, including a lot of these bikes and equipment. Go at it, enjoy. So yeah, it's been, this is why right at the start about what you'd said about I'm a busy chap. I've always had a tendency, even though I can recognize, and have for many years, that it may impact on my longevity on this planet. I've always had a tendency to burn the candle at both ends. I'm fully aware of this. I've almost made my peace with it because I've challenged myself on this many times over the years, and inevitably the side of Jason that wants to continue to burn the candle at both ends continues to win. And he came out at college many years ago, and he's not gone away. Again, going back to the self-care courses that I used to deliver, I used to talk an awful lot about our self-talk. And obviously I know these are all very basic concepts. We're not talking rocket science, and I wouldn't ever want people to think that mental health and well-being is rocket science, because it doesn't have to be all the time. Yeah, when we have this self-talk, we all have this internal dialogue. It's not something that we outwardly talk about very often, although it is getting better. And I always kind of used to reference it as to like the old Warner Brothers cartoons, where you'd have like an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other shoulder. And it's that kind of analogy, really, is your self-talk can be like that. And it's important to kind of keep that in check, I think, sometimes. Are you being your own best friend, or are you being your own worst enemy?
Yes, and it's that thing around, do we believe our thoughts, and do we drag ourselves into negative spirals? And something that I've really picked up on your story so far there, Jason, is around time. And yeah, you have this tendency, which you've recognised, to really throw yourself into lots of different really worthwhile and stimulating things. And yet from that can come burnout. And it sounds like maybe 2 or 3 times you've taken that opportunity to say, do you know what, I'm going to step back now and check in, what's going on with me, what do I want to do next, have a bit of time out. And for many people, I think this year has given that opportunity. Perhaps some don't see it as an opportunity, especially if they've lost their job, or they're working from home and only working part-time or something like that. But I think it is really useful to take those opportunities to check in and say, well, what's going on? Have a bit of a life audit and decide, am I on the right track? Do I want to make some changes here? Do I want to slow down? Do I want to speed up? Change direction?
Yeah, and I think as probably, hopefully, I've kind of made clear, although it wasn't really necessarily my intention. Sometimes that can be forced, and sometimes, preferably, it can be part of your coping strategies, and that you are in the habit of doing that. Sorry, my cat has just decided to enter the room and make an appearance, which she does when I'm working from home, to the great entertainment of some of my colleagues at work. So she's going to try and distract me now. But yeah, preferably, and I suppose that's a really good little sort of tip, really, isn't it? Is that if we can all, as human beings, recognize that actually it's much healthier to incorporate these periods of reflection and pause and self-analysis into your regular patterns, rather than not doing it at all and then being hit running into a brick wall, metaphorically speaking, and then suddenly being like, oh wow, I suddenly feel great because I've got this free space in my head and I can think clearer. And really, we should hopefully all be striving to incorporate that on a regular basis. And again, like I said earlier, trying to practice what I preach. It's something. It's easy to lose your way. It's easy to break habits, but it's also quite easy to make them as well. So one of the things that I'm happy to admit is that I'm quite inconsistent. I don't mind acknowledging that I'm inconsistent in my management of my own well-being. I'm inconsistent with my writing of music and songs and performance. In fact, the two things that I'm pretty consistent with is I'm pretty consistent with my work with mind, and that work that I do is something I'm very passionate about, and I'm pretty consistent when it comes to creating content for YouTube, which is something that me and my husband have started taking a lot more seriously over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. But when I do slip occasionally, one of the things that I come back to, and this is another thing that I dug out before the session this evening, Paul, when I do occasionally feel like I'm slipping or I'm not prioritizing my mental well-being enough, I do always think back to the self-care principles. And one of the things that kind of stemmed from me sort of learning more about kind of self-care tips and ideas, and really bringing mental well-being into the manageable realm for everybody, rather than us all just collectively putting GPs on a pedestal and, you know, it being out of our control, which simply is not the case. I come back to this. I don't want to give the BBC any free advertising, really, because this is a universal rules of thumb. But I don't know if people will be able to see this. It's quite bright, but it's just a basic blank diary. And what it's got at the top is pleasurable activities, activities that give you a sense of achievement, physical activity, and social activity. And all of those things can intermingle, but at the same time, you want to try and be able to separate some of them off as well. But essentially, the basic rule of thumb is that as a human being, 99.99% of human beings, if those four core elements are not part of your life on a regular basis, then you will inevitably often start to feel down, start to sort of feel low. Your emotions may be impacted, your feelings of self-worth may be impacted. All of this stuff that often on a day-to-day basis we don't think about or really appreciate until those things start to become impacted, and then we feel the results of that. So whenever I feel like I'm slipping myself, I nearly always come back to this, and I always try and keep things really, really simple. And by doing that, one of the other things that I've learned over the years, and I'm sure this is something that you'll be fully familiar with, Paul, is just the whole thing around us all setting ourselves realistic goals rather than goals that are unattainable, and then continue us feeling that spiral of decline and failure. I can't stand that word myself. I don't like to use it, but it is a reality of life. But I think we can set ourselves up for that sometimes in the same way that we can set ourselves up for success. So reining in the things that I want to achieve, and being realistic. I'm kind of alluding to SMART goals here is basically what I'm saying. It's SMART goals. It's not rocket science again. But a lot of the time when I was working with people, and have worked with many, many people over the years, the one consistent thread is that I've really enjoyed and appreciating helping other people in whatever guise that may be. So being able to give other people those self-care tools, and hitting upon that whole concept of SMART goals that I kind of picked up from the self-care training back in the day, and then suddenly sort of realizing light bulb moment linked to that early learning stuff was lots of people, when I was delivering training course, asked me about motivation. Motivation was a really consistent question that came up a lot, across all of the community engagement stuff I was doing, all of the well-being stuff. And one of the things that I realized was that SMART goals, reining yourself in, setting yourself a realistic goal that's achievable, it's timely, and you're working with something. When you achieve that goal, you achieve success. You achieve success in your life, and success inevitably leads to motivation. So a lot of the time, I started to, when people asked me about motivation levels and how to increase your motivation, where does motivation come from? I'd often use that little analogy that, and it was my way of selling the concept of SMART goals to people, to try and get them to dip the toe in the water and actually give it a try, rather than sort of, what some people would do in the early days is kind of almost just roll their eyes like, this is silly. And I'm like, no, this isn't silly. This is you starting to take control, of what you want to achieve in life, without setting yourself unrealistic targets and then not achieving them and then feeling rubbish for it. And again, when I'm working with young people, it'd be something like, I'm just going to down tools. I've got this passion to climb a mountain. Why climb a mountain in Wales? I'm going to down tools tomorrow. I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to fly out of this country and I'm going to climb Mount Everest. Is that achievable? Am I setting myself up for failure there? I'm going on holiday in 2 weeks and I want to be ripped. So I'm going to lose 50 kilograms and do 1,000 sit-ups a day, to be beach body ready, for 2 weeks time, in Magaluf. Is that achievable and realistic? No. So yeah, just reining in what can and can't be achieved, and then starting to redefine a success pattern. So you get used to small successes rather than what feels often like massive failures. And those small successes are, the feel-good chemicals and all that. That is so important. It's not the size of the success. It is merely that you've said you're going to do something and you do it. It really, really is that simple. It really is the sense of achievement and the brain chemistry and the psychology around it. It really isn't about how big the success is. It's just that you said you was going to do it and you did it. So if I say, I have been really unfit and really unhealthy this year, I'm probably the most unhealthiest I've been in terms of, kind of a physical activity routine, than I've been in a very long time. So what is realistic for me at the moment is that to say, well, what I can do and is realistic for me at the moment is for the next couple of weeks, I can find 10 minutes a day to just jump on the exercise bike, which is in the kitchen. That's something that I can realistically fit into my day. And I know that I can achieve it. And when I do achieve it, that's when that period of reflection comes in. And it's like, okay, so what's next? Again, it's simple stuff, but it works for me. And I've seen it work for a lot of other people. Yeah, and then obviously coming back to this as well, which is linked to all of that, because your SMART goals need to link to you finding time for pleasurable activities, doing activities that give you a sense of achievement, being physically active, and also, even under these difficult circumstances at the moment, finding new and inventive and creative ways to be sociable, because the vast majority of us are social creatures. And the social isolation and the impact of that on individuals, particularly this year, with what we're dealing with at the moment, Paul, is it's terrible. So technology like this, us being able to, at work, use Zoom to be able to deliver Connect 5 mental wellbeing training to like 700 plus people across Greater Manchester, that wouldn't, I don't even know whether we would have achieved that if we were doing it face to face. So there are, dare I say it, there are tiny silver linings that can be found in all of this, because we're having to find new ways to connect and to socialize and see friendly faces on the other end of the computer screen. So a lot of it is, let's not beat around the bush. 98% of it is doom and gloom. And there's a lot of people out there that are in terrible situation, which is why I'm glad that I do the work that I do. One of the things we were chatting about with the YouTube stuff that I do with those vegan guys, one of the things that I was chatting about on our live on, it was only the other night, we were live recently anyway, we were talking about the fact that we're going to stream live on Christmas Day. And we did it last year randomly, and Paul, the husband, it was his idea, and he said he would just really hate for anybody to be sitting on their own at home on Christmas Day. So even if they could just tune into us and be with us for the hour that we're eating our Christmas dinner, it might make their Christmas Day better. And last year I was a little bit like, and then he explained it like that, and I was like, yeah, now you've just completely sold it. You've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. And this year, we're going to do it again, and there's even more reason this year to do it. So at some point on Christmas Day, for an hour or so, whilst we're eating our Christmas dinner, we'll just be eating and chatting and streaming live on YouTube, and people can type messages to us and ask us questions, and we can just celebrate Christmas with anybody that wants to celebrate it with us.
And it's a lot of fun. The Vegan Guys on YouTube, if anyone wants to watch it, and Facebook as well, I think.
We're everywhere. We're everywhere, and it's those vegan guys.
Sorry. Yes. So yeah, lots of rich stuff in there, Jason. Thank you. I like the 4 different compartments. So it was do something pleasurable, something that will give you a sense of achievement, something that has a sense of purpose, and something that is social. Have I got that right?
Yeah, I think pretty much. Yeah, that was pretty much spot on. Yeah,
and having those smart goals around that, and maybe even printing that out each week and saying, okay, plan out the week, make sure I've got all 4 of those boxes ticked at least once in that week. Is that a kind of good guide for folks to follow, do you think?
Actually, it's a really good point, Paul, that you mention, and sort of just expand on that a little bit. So when I was, I've not delivered self-care training for a good few years now, but when there's been other types of training that I've delivered, and a lot of it has incorporated these kind of key principles. So linked to the SMART goals and being realistic and making sure that things are achievable. If you was going to fill in your diary for the week, it might be that when you first start, sorry, it's very bright, but when you first start, you pick one achievement for one day. So you might say, right, Wednesday, I'm going to choose one of the 4, and I'm just going to focus on that. And so Wednesday would be, I'm going to do something pleasurable for myself, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I'm going to do it, whether it's 2 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour. That could be, a 30-minute soak in the bath with candles. It doesn't always have to have a financial cost attached to it. We must remember that self-care doesn't always have to cost. So being realistic and achievable, making it realistic and achievable, I would say anybody that wants to incorporate this kind of strategy, they would start off by choosing one thing for one day, and do that for like a week, and then reevaluate and see how you feel at the end of that period of time. You can look at your diary and you can see what you've achieved, and just kind of reflect on that, because that's important as well. Reflect and take some time to sit with your success, for want of a better expression. Sit with it, let it sit with you, enjoy that. It's very important. And then think, well, okay, next week, should we step it up? Should we keep it on this even keel for another week and just, still stick with one thing one day? Or do we go 2 things one day? Do we think about maybe a crossover? So it might be that actually, okay, I'm going to do something that gives me a sense of achievement, but it's also in some way going to be sociable as well. wouldn't want people to do that all the time, because it's a little bit of a trade-off. There's pros and cons around that, in that you kind of meshing two together. So you're doing something hopefully that's really wonderful, but also you might be losing out on other opportunities to do other things. So without overcomplicating it. But yeah, it's just small steps, I think, is the way to go.
Great. If you happen to have an electronic copy of that template, you could send it through to me if you got one. Brilliant. And then I'll post it in the Hive.
I think I have, and if I haven't, I'll be able to scan it and send it over to you as a PDF.
Brilliant. Thank you, sir. That'll be useful. So we've touched on quite a bit of your journey to becoming a self-care pioneer, guru, whatever we want to call you, and some of the tips that you have around that. So nature, smart objectives, balance, creativity. And what about nutrition? I mean, you mentioned those vegan guides. So do you feel that nutrition for you, maybe not this year, but in general, has been connected to your mental health? Or do you have any tips around how to maximize your well-being through nutrition?
Yeah, I think I'm pausing because I want to make sure that I acknowledge that whatever you put in your body, ultimately, again, keeping things really, really simple, it shouldn't surprise most people that what they put in their body will make them feel a certain way a lot of the time. And I don't think up until maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I think probably I feel as though there was a bit of a shift, and I think more people started to be sort of join those dots up and think, hang on a minute. And I think some of it stemmed from a couple of documentaries. One of the big ones was the Morgan Spurlock documentary, I think.
Supersize Me.
That's the one. Thank you, Paul. Yeah. And around the time or a little bit after that, there was a couple more that came out. What the Health, and a few others that were kind of not necessarily specifically focusing on the fast food industry anymore, but more focusing on the fact that, how can I put this? There are better ways for us to survive and thrive on this planet than the mass consumption of animals. And I certainly don't want to use this precious time I've got here with you, Paul, to step up on my vegan pedestal. So I have no intention of doing that whatsoever. Anybody that is even vaguely interested can find us all over the internet with down to earth vegan stuff. So I'm not going to use this as a platform. But what nutrition has done for me is, first off, it's allowed me to remain reasonably healthy, especially this year, considering my physical activity level has dropped quite low. But also, I think it's important to recognize and acknowledge that I eat a vegan diet, but it is important to point out that that does not mean healthy by any means, and that there is junk food out there that I can eat and that I enjoy, and I and the husband are going to be doing a week of whole food plant-based next month, and I know, and we acknowledge this on a regular basis, that whenever we eat whole food plant-based, we never feel better than when we're eating whole food plant-based on a regular basis. I'm not saying necessarily that you have to eat like that every day. We will certainly never get to the point where we're going to do that every day. But when we have that consistently within everything else that we eat, it just elevates everything by at least 10%. The way that your brain functions, that extra little bit of a spring in your step after you've eaten, not kind of feeling bloated or having any kind of digestive issues or anything like that, just clean, healthy. So yeah, all of that stuff. I mean, I was vegetarian for about 17, 18 years prior to going vegan. So that works for me. It can work for 99.9% of the population out there. And it's well backed by now, thankfully, it's well backed by rigorous scientific study, by very respected colleges and universities around the world. And there's lots of evidence from lots of studies, and also just looking at people who've been doing it for a heck of a long time now. I think that helps. You know, we've got people in their 60s and their 70s now that have been vegan for a very, very long time. So, yeah, obviously, with you touching on and asking me about nutrition, I was going to delve there a little bit. But equally, since the self-care days, I've always been a proponent of a balance when it comes to nutritional intake, and that, you know, it's not good for us to necessarily to deprive ourselves of things. I've never been a proponent of dieting. I've never, you know, whenever I've worked with people over the years, and part of the self-care training program and delivering training for Royal Society of Public Health, it was always about trying to help people to understand about what a balanced diet actually is, and input versus output in terms of calories and things like that. We shouldn't necessarily have to deprive ourselves, but at the same time, I also have to acknowledge that I'm one of those really annoying people that has a genetic disposition. Some would say genetically blessed. So what I always say to people is, I may look fit and healthy on the outside, but I am actually rotting on the inside. And that, you know, sort of gives them some flavour for the fact that visual appearance means nothing. You know, some of the greatest, some fantastic climbers, a lot of them are very lithe, very slim, athletic men and women. But equally, you can find some phenomenal rock climbers the world over that are not, that break the stereotypes. And the way that our physical appearance does not in any way act as an indicator as to how healthy we are as human beings. So, you know, I think that's important to acknowledge. And equally, when we are taking those moments to be self-aware, to self-analyze, is to be authentic and be true to yourself when you're having that self-talk. And that's something I've had to do, particularly this year, when I've kind of been, you know, had very low points, you know, not been able to hug mum and dad since March, missed my sister's wedding, you know, and half of what's kept me, you know, positive and sort of reasonably good spirit is connecting with other people. You know, through whether that's work, whether that's through YouTube, teaching a bit of guitar when I've been able to, and I've been able to do it safely and not have to worry about it, because the last thing that I want to do when I'm teaching is to feel anxious whilst I'm teaching, because I think sometimes that anxiety can transfer onto the student, and that's the last thing I would want to happen for anybody. So yeah, it's really, it's all been about connecting, especially the last 6 months, definitely.
Yeah, connection is so crucial. And balance, you know, if I'm taking anything away from today's talk, Jason, we've only got 5 minutes left. But balance in all things, you know, whether it's nutrition, how you talk to yourself, the activities you do each week. Yeah, that's what it is, isn't it? The key to success, balance.
It's really interesting that as we sort of slowly move towards the latter stages of this chat, and it's been really nice, Paul. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's so interesting that actually you reference balance, because prior to all of this stuff, prior to everything that I've done over the years around mental health, physical health, teaching, training, helping others, before all of this, one of my big passions in life was Bruce Lee and Kung Fu. So, and as a kid growing up, I did martial arts. I was very aware of Bruce Lee, and I was aware not just through watching his films, but I was all, and appreciating that stuff. But I was also aware that there was this other side to him, and there was this very deep philosophical side. And I'm really glad that I became aware of that at a very young age. So even though I might not have had the wherewithal to absorb and take everything in as a youngster, what did strike was exactly that, what you said, Paul: balance. And having balance in life, and having internal balance. And so much so that I actually had Bruce Lee's famous "Be like water" quote. I don't know if any of the viewers will be aware of that, but Google Bruce Lee "Be like water." I actually, that was something that really stuck with me, and I actually ended up having that tattooed on my arm right here. So yeah, there you go. There's all the dots joined up, and it's some kind of strange diagram on the wall, like a spider's just crawled through paint and gone up the wall. But yeah, that's that.
Marvelous. Great. I've really enjoyed that. And I wonder if there's anything else that you feel you'd like to cover. Any final tips from Batman's tool belt before we finish?
Yeah, I think thanks again, Paul. It has been really, really great. I would say, I think the balance thing, the connection thing is really important. I think the obvious thing to say is reach out when you need to reach out, obviously, and there are so many opportunities and resources and people at your disposal, particularly over the next 6 to 12 months. If you are feeling like you need some help, do not suffer in silence. I think that's probably one of the most important things to say. But what I would also say, in equal measure, yes, there is help there, but there is also help here and here. And allow yourself that time to self-improve, even if it is only 5 minutes a day. Allow yourself that time to sit in this busy, hustling, bustling world, to be mindful and have that little talk with yourself and think, okay, what's going on here? Let's just spend a minute or two thinking about the pros and the cons and how the ups and the downs. Allow yourself that time, and that's a good thing. Don't feel bad about it. Don't feel guilty for it. But yeah, I could waffle on for hours, Paul, of course, but as I said right at the start, but it's been a real pleasure. Your questions have been fantastic and really on point. And I think what you do is absolutely brilliant, because what you're doing ultimately is you're getting people talking about mental health and well-being. You are helping to reduce the stigma around that, first and foremost, and you are a beacon for other people to come to, and be part of a really positive community. So thank you for doing what you do as well.
Very kind of you. Thank you. So self-care is not selfish. You're worth it. Those 5 minutes, non-negotiable each day. You mentioned mindfulness right at the end there. That's one of my non-negotiables. 5 minutes at least of meditation every day. And yeah, balance. Lots of stuff to take away. And the Bruce Lee quote, "Be like water." So thank you, Jason. It's been very enjoyable, and it's yeah, great to hear you talk about your own journey and your expertise very eloquently and wisely, and with great compassion as well. So thank you again for being here.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Greatly appreciate the kind words and the opportunity. And I think, without wanting to throw my husband under the bus, you might find a chat with him very interesting at some point in the future, because he has gone through PTSD. And he's got a really interesting journey in terms of his own mental well-being. And he's a drag queen, and he's got all kinds of crazy things going on in his life. So you never know. I can make that connection, and put you in contact. And if something comes down the line, then that'd be fabulous.
Please do. Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll leave it there if that's okay with you, Jason.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks again. Take care of yourself.
All the best.
Bye. So there it is, folks. Jason Bromley. I thought that was wonderful. Actually, lots of really useful tips, tools, advice, wisdom, call it what you will. And really nice to share that hour with Jason and you guys. I hope you got something useful out of it. Do feel free to post any comments, and Jason's kindly agreed to answer any questions that you may have. So if anything springs to mind afterwards, pop them in the comments, and if Jason doesn't see them, I can forward them on. And we'll also put that PDF that Jason's hopefully going to send me around the 4 different things to focus on each week in order to get some balance. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you would like to share the group with friends, family, colleagues, whoever it is, then please feel free to do so. Invite any individuals in who you think would benefit from being here. The more the merrier, and spread this message of well-being and mental health and connection and positivity and all of the other wonderful things that go on here. And if you are enjoying it, if you're feeling benefits from what happens here, then you might want to buy me a coffee. Not a real one, please, because I do not like coffee, but you can go to buymeacoffee.com and you can subscribe for £7 a month and get lots of wonderful benefits. Or you can just drop me £3 now if you've enjoyed it, or at any time that you feel flush and that you've benefited in some way. And I think that's it. That's it. So those vegan guys, if you'd like to follow Jason and his husband Paul on Facebook, YouTube, or anywhere else on social media, it's a lot of fun. And if you're not doing anything on Christmas Day, if you're on your own, maybe you can watch them eat their dinner. Okay, so thanks again, folks. Take care of yourselves. Actually, do take care of yourselves, and maybe take some leaves out of Jason's book and be kind to yourself, even if you slip off the self-care wagon. Okay, see you soon. Bye-bye.